In this episode, we give you the full recap of how you defeated AB 942, the bill that would have broken 2 million rooftop solar contracts. We also explain the recent California Supreme Court decision on rooftop solar. And we spoke with the executive director of the California Solar and Storage Association, Brad Heavner, about getting a battery, adding more solar panels to your system, and more. Ready? Set?
Welcome to Solar Freedom, your home, your roof, your power, the frontline resource for defending the freedom and independence of rooftop solar. I'm Dave Rosenfeld, executive director of the Solar Rights Alliance.
And I'm Cailey Underhill, Advocacy and Development Director of the Solar Rights Alliance, where we let you know when there's threats to your investment and give you the tools to fight back and put the power back in your hands.
All right, well, let's get into it. Cailey, what's the latest in rooftop solar?
Two big developments over the past couple of months here, Dave. The first one is that your solar contract is safe thanks to you. So there was a big bill, AB 942, that would have broken 2 million rooftop solar contracts across the state of California. And you and tens of thousands of other people like you stood up, made sure your voice was heard with your legislator, and stopped that bill from becoming law. It's a huge deal. Congratulations to everyone who took action on this issue. So this bill is AB 942. It was authored by Assemblymember Lisa Calderon, who was an executive at SoCal Edison for 25 years before becoming an assembly member. And the analogy that I've been using is that fighting this bill was a bit like taking wax at a piñata, where each time we would go to whack this thing and chunks of it would fall out. So it made its way through the assembly, but got amended twice, chunks of the bill falling out along the way. But that final whack where everything came out of the piñata didn't come until the Senate Energy Committee, which is chaired by Senator Josh Becker, who decided that he wanted to really step out and be a rooftop solar champion on this issue. So he worked with the author of the bill to do a process that's called gut and amend, where they delete the bill. They gut the bill. They just take everything out. So all the candy fell out of the piñata, but you still had the container, and put something else back in. So everything that had anything to do with rooftop solar came out. So no longer breaks solar contracts, no longer blames rooftop solar users for rising rates, no longer punishes solar users just for putting panels on your roof. Huge deal. What they put in instead is a new threshold for people to receive the California Climate Credit, which is a name that has been confusing a lot of folks. So to be clear, the California Climate Credit is just the result of the state's cap and trade program. The utilities have to dole out twice a year a credit because of that program. And it's about $60 twice a year for most people, depending on your utility territory. And everybody gets it right now. This bill, with the new piece in it, establishes a new minimum threshold for receiving that climate credit. And that new minimum threshold is a utility bill of $300 per year. So if you pay $300 per year in utility bills, you still get the climate credit. Coincidentally, there is a utility tax that is coming down the pike that we are fighting hard against and have been fighting hard against that is going to create a minimum bill of just about $300 a year. So it no longer targets rooftop solar users. It no longer targets most people because most folks will meet that minimum threshold as a result of this utility tax. So that is what is currently in AB 942. It may or may not wind up passing in its current form, but we have removed our opposition to the bill because it no longer targets rooftop solar users. It no longer punishes rooftop solar users, which is a big deal. And again, the direct result of your efforts.
Yeah, this was a total grassroots victory. There is no question about it. Legislator after legislator told us that they received more calls, more emails from their constituents, you, than any other bill this year. And they hear hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bills. Mm-hmm. So you really stood out as making this a huge issue. And it's not to say that there weren't others who were really playing a key role. I think we need to thank the California Association of Realtors for taking a very strong stance of opposition to breaking solar contracts because it totally screws up the sale of the home.
Right.
There were more than 100 other organizations that we fought side by side with, environmental groups like the Environmental Working Group, Environment California, consumer groups like CalPERG and Consumer Watchdog. But at the end of the day, the hero of all heroes is you, the solar user and the solar supporter, that made the phone calls, sent the email, in many cases actually showed up and spoke in person or face-to-face with your legislator. And so you really do get an awful lot of credit. And please keep it up, because the next attack on rooftop solar from the utilities is just around the corner.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. It's so terrible you have to laugh.
Yep.
And your voice is going to be needed again to just remind the legislators, do not mess with rooftop solar customers. And obviously we would love to do more things that are proactive too. And we have some ideas that we're cooking up that your voice will make a big difference on as well, so that we can really just stop these silly attacks and move forward. So that's what's going on there. Cailey, what else is going on in rooftop solar?
So the other big piece of news is about a decision that the California State Supreme Court made that is related to rooftop solar. And that decision, it's been a long time coming. For one thing, folks have been waiting for this for a really long time. But interestingly, it also is going to have some really profound ramifications, potentially for rooftop solar, but for sure for the California Public Utility Commission, which got us into this mess in the first place.
Yep. And so this lawsuit is about a program that's called net energy metering. Sometimes it's referred to as NEM. And net energy metering is something that's been in place in California since the 1990s. And what it does is it allows people who have solar panels on their roof, when they make more electricity than their home needs, it allows them to send that extra electricity to their neighbors. And when that happens, the utility charges the neighbor, your neighbor, for that electricity at the same rate that the utility would charge the neighbor for the electricity that comes from far away. And when they do that, they also pay the solar user pretty much the same amount. The net result is that the utility doesn't make any money on this electricity, your excess electricity, and they don't lose any money on the excess electricity. The only thing that's different is that the utility does not have to deliver as much of their electricity to you or your neighbor.
So for the utilities, Dave, another way of saying this is it's just basically electrons in, electrons out, money in, money out. They do not make any money on this process. They don't lose any money on this process, right? For the utilities, it's just in and out.
Yeah, that's 100% right. The utilities sometimes like to call net energy metering an incentive program or a subsidy. Sometimes members of the media call it that. It's really annoying because it's not.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
There's no incentive.
Right.
I have solar, right?
Right.
I paid my own money to put the solar panels on my roof.
Yes.
That excess electricity that's going to my neighbor, I paid to make that electricity.
Right.
I also paid for the local poles and wires that connect me and my neighbor, because I also pay a utility bill. So
Right.
I've paid for that energy. I paid for shipping and handling. All the utility is doing is then collecting money from the neighbor, giving it to me. The neighbor doesn't know any different because it's the same amount they would pay for the electricity, whether it comes from me or the utility. And it's a wash for the utility.
So the advantage to the neighbor, whether or not they know it, because it doesn't sound like it shows up on a line item on their bill, is that the more rooftop solar that we have, the fewer poles and wires we need. So less of those long distance power lines that we then are paying for in our rates are showing up on our bills because we have more rooftop solar. So it benefits everybody, except for the utilities, because they make their profits on all those long distance poles and wires that they get to build, right? So it is a huge advantage for the neighbor and for you when you're putting those solar panels on your roof.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Like, some very, very good research has shown that in 2024 alone, the 2 million rooftop solar systems saved all ratepayers about $1.5 billion just in that year alone, largely because of reducing the amount of money the utilities have to spend building long distance poles and wires. And so, yeah, absolutely 100%. So anyway, that's what net energy metering has been up to this point. And there's about 2 million solar users on the net energy metering program. But all that changed with the CPUC starting in April of 2023. And what the CPUC did was they made a big change to the program that anyone going forward, getting solar from April 2023 onward, they can still send their extra solar energy to the grid, but they're only going to get 80% of what previously people have gotten. The CPUC essentially slashed how much they get paid for their excess solar by 80%. And that's a huge deal, because if you get solar under that system, then your monthly savings from solar is a lot less, which means it takes quite a bit longer for a solar investment to pay back. And so people are still getting solar, but in much, much, much lower numbers. We're seeing solar adoptions now that we haven't, at a level that we haven't seen since 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's obviously having then huge impacts also on the solar industry in addition.
Right. So it is just harder for solar to pencil out for folks under this new system that the California Public Utility Commission has created. But Dave, am I thinking about this correctly where, all right, if I'm the solar user and I have panels on my roof, which I paid to put on my roof to collect that energy to help my home offset energy for my neighbors, if I'm getting 80% less credit for every kilowatt hour of energy I'm sending back to the grid, doesn't that mean that the utilities are then profiting on that the same 80%? Like, This is a great deal for the utilities, right?
It's an awesome deal for the utilities. I mean, where else do you get to take somebody who's spent all the money on something and you get to essentially pocket 80% of the value of that whole thing? Welcome to California,
that they paid
folks.
for. Jeez, yes, totally. So then this begs the question. We get this question all the time. Folks are like, wait a second. It's called the California Public Utilities Commission. Like, public is in the name. The job of the CPUC is to look out for us, the public. Why would they make this decision that so obviously directly benefits the monopoly utilities, who, by the way, have recorded record profits, and just screw over the public? What gives?
Yeah, I mean, the CPUC is a captured agency. They're a rogue agency. They're a renegade agency. They're captured by the utilities. The commission itself is appointed by Governor Newsom. Governor Newsom has been captured by the utilities. He took $2.5 million from the utilities in campaign contributions. He's taken twice as much, if not more, from the utilities than Governor Brown and Governor Schwarzenegger combined.
Right.
The whole thing is basically rigged for the benefit of the utilities and their profit-making machine. This is very, very clear. This is why rates are going through the roof, why we're paying out of our nose, because they just rubber stamp whatever the utility wants. And so this we know. But this is what's going on. But fortunately, we might have an opportunity to reverse this decision because there's now a lawsuit against it that's getting some traction.
Right. And so these three groups, the Environmental Working Group, the Protect Our Communities Foundation, and the Center for Biological Diversity, three of our allies who fortunately specialize in lawsuits, filed a lawsuit against this NEM 3 decision, which is also sometimes called NBT. So if you're hearing that, those refer to the same thing. Its official name is NBT, Net Billing Tariff. So these three organizations file a lawsuit. The courts didn't have to pick up that lawsuit, but a court of appeal in San Francisco did pick up the lawsuit. They took a look at the evidence and said, there's a long precedence in law of deferring to the CPUC, of just saying, they're the experts, they know better than we do, we're not really supposed to get involved in their decisions, so we're just going to leave it. We're just going to hands off, defer to the CPUC. And so they said that's what we're going to do because there's this long legal precedent of doing that. We can't touch this decision. We just got to defer to the CPUC. And Dave, our allies, those three organizations were like, no, because that would mean that the CPUC is above the law. So then they appealed the decision to the state Supreme Court, which just recently picked it up.
That's right. The Supreme Court picked up the decision, which they didn't have to do, and they did. And our allies, these three groups, argued to the Supreme Court basically the same thing. Number one, they said the CPUC is not above the law. You, the courts, actually do have the power and maybe even the obligation to review CPUC decisions if something seems askance. That was number one. And then number two, they argued that the CPUC broke the law when they did the net metering decision. The Supreme Court agreed with our allies that the CPUC is not above the law and that courts have both the right and the obligation to review CPUC decisions. And then they instructed the Court of Appeal, the original judges that heard this case, to hear us out, to actually hear us out on the merits of the case that the CPUC broke the law and made this decision illegally.
And so, just so that folks understand, well, what are they saying? Like, how was the law broken? What is it that these three organizations are kind of going for here when they're saying, look, this is actually an illegal decision because it broke the law?
Yeah. So California statute is very, very clear that when the CPUC makes changes to net energy metering, which they have they can do that.
They can do that, right?
But when they make those They're allowed, yeah. And in fact, the law says that they should. And we agree they should. No program should ever be set in stone.
Right.
But when they make changes, they have to consider all of the benefits and costs, but all of the benefits as well, of rooftop solar to rooftop solar consumers and all ratepayers. And they also have to consider the costs and benefits of rooftop solar to the utilities as well. And what we believe the CPUC did was they only considered the benefits and costs of rooftop solar to the utility and failed, they only did a perfunctory, but a completely inadequate look at the benefits of rooftop solar to ratepayers and to consumers who get solar. And like a laughable amount of it.
Right, of course.
And the law is pretty clear. You got to do all of this.
The whole thing, whole shebang.
The whole shebang, right. And the law is also very clear what the benefits are. So the law goes through like the benefits of rooftop solar, including reducing the need for the utilities to have to build a lot of infrastructure, reducing strain on the grid during peak demand times, right? Giving consumers an ability and choices just to, lower their electricity bill, clean air, less pollution from fossil fuels. It goes through what the benefits are, and it's very obvious when you look at the record that the CPUC did not check those boxes.
Go through, clearly.
In a whole bunch of different ways. And so we planned then now to argue to the court all of this, and what we want to do is try to draw the judge in and get under the hood and just show them what we saw them do. Right. And our hope is that the judges will agree. We obviously don't know. And so obviously we would all love to have a crystal ball and know what they will do, but it's hard to say exactly how it'll end up.
Right. And so one of the exciting things here is that the lawyers can present new evidence now that this court has to rehear it. And so there are sort of, while none of us have a crystal ball, there are sort of three categories of decisions, we think, that the courts could make. So they could say, nope, y'all are wrong. We're pretty sure that the utilities are right and it's going to just be the way it is. Like, get over it. We're moving forward. That could happen. Another thing that could happen is the court could say, CPUC, it looks like you did violate the law. You got to go back and make the decision. We're not going to tell you what to do. Like, we're not going to prescribe you have to fix these XYZ things, but you got to go back and you got to fix it. And then the third option is they could say, okay, you did break the law. You do have to fix it, and you have to fix it in these specific ways that we are going to tell you how to fix it. So that's sort of from the least to the most of what they could do. And nobody knows what exactly they're going to do. And the timeline is kind of lengthy here, Dave, right? Like, it's a waiting game again. It's
a waiting game. I mean, they'll probably make a decision sometime by the middle of next year, and we'll have some clarity there. But really, this is all now in the hands of lawyers and judges. There's not a lot for us little old grassroots people to do for this particular fight. There's obviously lots of things for us to do.
Plenty we can do in other areas. And so the bottom line here, folks, the two takeaways are, number one, the state Supreme Court decided that the California Public Utility Commission is not above the law. Number two, rooftop solar will get its day in court. So we just got to wait to see how the cookie crumbles in that particular area. And until then, in the meantime, there are a few other things that have happened we want to make sure that you know about. One in particular has occurred at the federal level. Dave, if you want to kind of walk people through what is going on there with this federal tax credit thing.
Yeah, so the federal tax credit that up to this point, if you get solar and or a solar powered battery, you can get a tax credit of up to 30% off the cost of installing that. That's going away at the end of this year. And it's 30% essentially off the cost of installing a pretty expensive product.
It ain't nothing.
It ain't nothing. And it's going to go away at the end of this year, meaning that if you want to get that 30% tax credit, you're going to need to get that stuff in place by December 31st to claim it on your taxes when you do it next year. Many solar people who have solar are always asking a question, should I get a battery? And so a lot of people now are asking the question, well, gosh, this 30% tax credit's going away. Maybe this is the time for me to get a battery. We always tell people never feel rushed into a decision. So we don't really like that this is the situation where people are feeling a little bit of the pressure to do that. But nonetheless, it's a fair question that I think people need to ask. But really, it's always a good time to be talking about should I get a battery or should I not get a battery, whether the tax credit exists or not. And so our next guest is actually going to be the perfect person to help you if you're considering getting a battery and you're not sure if this is the time or should I wait. Our next guest is going to be one of the perfect people to listen to get some good advice on this and a couple of other very common burning questions that solar users and prospective solar users are asking themselves right now.
Can't wait. Here we go.
So we're really excited to introduce our next guest, Brad Heavner, the Executive Director of the California Solar and Storage Association, or CALSSA. I've actually known Brad for 20 years. Back in the day, I first met Brad when I was working for a consumer advocacy organization, and Brad was the head of the research department. And even then I was kind of a young, just starting out, and I was always just struck by like how deep Brad's knowledge was on issues where I thought I had a handle on it, and then I realized there were like many, many, many layers of other knowledge. And so I immediately just always went to Brad when I needed to just know what's the right answer on things. And he was always able to just explain it so clearly that I took notes to just go like, you actually can take complex topics and break them down and explain them to everyday people in a way that brings them into the conversation and the debate. And so I always appreciated learning that from Brad. That was years ago. And then through just good fortune, when I started Solar Rights Alliance in 2018, I learned that Brad was working at the Solar Industry Association. And so it's been a happy turn of events that I've had a chance to work with Brad again, literally 20 years after I met him, in an entirely different capacity, working to fight for rooftop solar. And so the California Solar and Storage Association advocates on behalf of the solar industry, the companies that install and manufacture. I'm sure Brad will talk about that some more. And so since we, Solar Rights Alliance, advocate for the interests of consumers, you can imagine that we have a lot in common and we work a lot together. So we're really excited to have Brad on the show. Brad, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. We did some fun stuff back in the day. It's always been my role, basically, the policy nerd in a community full of clean energy advocates that are out there doing really good, important work.
Thank you for being here. And just to kick it off, just curious, what drew you to becoming an advocate for the rooftop solar industry?
Well, I'm equally motivated between dealing with climate solutions, climate change, and just helping small businesses and helping to democratize energy. I love empowering consumers. I love creating an alternative to monopoly utility framework, which has a lot of real bad problems. And so I'm just really motivated to, especially right now, as we use more energy and we just need more energy for electric vehicles and heat pumps and other things, to make sure it's not just we do the same thing we've always done. Build huge substations and power lines and power plants, and feed the monopoly utility in the process. That there is a better way, that it's very exciting with batteries, that we can be more complex and create community energy within our communities. It's a cool problem to solve, and I'm happy to be in the middle of it.
Yeah, and so as you sort of look down the road of rooftop solar, what are you most excited about? And also, what are you most worried about? As you're talking about these incredible things that rooftop solar and storage can do, what do you see as we're moving forward?
Well, the most exciting thing is what I was just touching on is just the ability to power communities within communities. That and with solar and storage, there's been a switch, or we're in the middle of a transition where for a long time, just producing solar only on our rooftops without batteries, and you're producing it during the daylight hours, is exactly what we needed. That's still when our energy usage peaks. So all the first 2 million solar roofs that we put up with mostly without batteries are still doing their exact job. Power in the middle of the day when we use it most. But then we also need power in the evening. And so we can now use sun-powered energy to power our lives when after the sun is down. And so that obviously requires batteries to store it and use it later. And then also, as these challenges get more complex, being able to determine exactly when we're charging and discharging those batteries in response to when everybody is using energy, to coordinate our usage and our generation and our battery discharge is really a great challenge, and something entirely, it is growing. We're doing it right now, and it's going to grow. And I just love being part of that. The biggest challenge that I see is the monopoly utilities not liking that model, right? Anything that takes weight off of their power lines is competition for them, sadly. We should be working completely in league with the utilities, with a shared purpose. But instead, they see us as competition, and they want to own all the power infrastructure, and they have a lot of political clout. So as much as we're able to sort of turn out people in California where solar is super popular, the utilities play political hardball, and they're very good at it.
Right. I mean, they've poured over $1 billion in political donations to sitting politicians, academics, nonprofits over the course of the past 20 years, all, as you said, to defend their sort of stranglehold on the ability to build all these new power lines and transmission lines and infrastructure, because that's how they get their profits. And so they're seeing rooftop solar as the competition for that, when, as you said, really we should be working together. There should be a way to deliver energy to people. Also, I think, what was it? Powering our communities within our communities. That needs to be a bumper sticker. I need
Right.
that on my car. That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about power at a lot of different levels. The utilities and their union have a lot of power. It's not like rooftop solar doesn't have power. As you said, it's very popular. There's a huge constituency of support for it. There's no silver bullet to kind of getting out of the mess that the utilities have created. But like, what do you see as like some of the things that like the industry or consumers or anyone can be doing to just like increase the likelihood that the vision that you're talking about succeeds and the utilities vision does not?
Well, I mean, participating in the political process, absolutely number one. The work of Solar Rights Alliance is essential. I've loved watching your organization grow. The 2 million customers that are out there in California with solar on their roofs, many of whom are really engaged. It's a huge political force. It has made a big difference and will continue to. So, responding to the calls for action is absolutely the number one answer, because it really works. It matters. And then, participating when there are these, flex alerts and other things where, they want citizens to stand up and to do their part in the overall energy picture. The more we do that, the more that popular that will be amongst the bureaucratic technicians.
So let's turn our attention to one of the things that will help us create, this vision that you're talking about, which is batteries. So a lot of people who have solar are almost always asking themselves, like, should I get a battery? And there's a lot of increased interest in this right now because the federal tax credit for a battery, you can get 30% off the cost of a battery if you're eligible, is going away at the end of this year. And we always tell people, like, you should never feel forced into getting a battery. Like, don't rush, do your due diligence. But a lot of people are rightfully so asking themselves, is this the right time to get a battery because the federal tax credit is going away? And I want to talk about that and just get what your take is on that for consumers who are out there. But before we get into that, just regardless of the timing, what are some of the reasons that a solar user would want to get a battery?
Well, it's to take part and take control of our energy system. That we all band together, and together we are running the energy system in California. And so there are compensation mechanisms that you get back for that participation that can pay for that battery over time. But I see a lot of solar customers that are interested in, they got solar in the first place because they want to sort of take charge of their own energy consumption. And the next step is to do it with a battery. So they're doing more of that for themselves and also for the community. For customers that have a low bill after installing solar without batteries, which many net metering customers are, and that's their motivation, then it's fine. You don't have to get a battery to continue that. But if you still have a bill you want to knock down, and if you want to participate in community energy, then a battery is a good option. And it's a good time from technological standpoint and cost standpoint, as you mentioned, because of the tax credit and also because prices have come down. And there are a lot of battery products on the market today that were not 5 years ago, that the manufacturers have stepped up and created. They've designed systems that really, work. They're more plug and play. They're well tested, and it's a good time to see what's out there.
And one thing that you kind of skated on it, but just to kind of, so like one reason that I hear a lot of NEM1 and NEM2 customers springing for the battery isn't so much the immediate savings that they're going to get, because as you said, they're already saving quite a lot of money, but they're just totally freaked out by blackouts. And so isn't it the case that a battery, if it's sized correctly, that can really keep most of your power on in a blackout?
Well, generally, that is what the solar company will do in designing what size battery, what type of battery for your home is to get through a blackout and power the critical needs, and keep your fridge going, keep your electronics operating, and other critical loads that you care about. If you need air conditioning in a really hot place, then we can cover that. And to ride through that, I mean, absolutely, this is a primary motivation of getting batteries. Because it works. I love hearing the stories where one customer says, "Oh, his neighbors were upset about the power going out," and they said, "The power went out," because they didn't even notice.
What power outage?
Yeah.
I've lost count of how many times I hear this, and where the solar owner then just plugs a bunch of extension cords into their house and throws it over the fence so that their neighbors can charge their cell phones and all that.
Yeah, or they come over. I've had people put medicine in my fridge, and it's neighbors and friends helping each other. If you've got a battery, then you can help your community, and I see that happening. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is beautiful. So then on to the federal tax credit. Can you just describe for people that may not be familiar with it, what is it, how do you benefit from it, and what's happening with it?
Yeah. The federal government, it pays 30% of the cost of installing solar and storage in the form of a tax credit. So you get it back when you pay your tax, just deduct it from the amount that you pay in your taxes the next time you file taxes. And that's been a pretty core element of solar economics for many years. And it was scheduled to continue for a lot more years, but through the budget reconciliation bill that passed a month ago, that is getting terminated early. And so for residential customers who buy their systems and own their systems as opposed to leasing them, that credit ends at the end of this year, meaning you need to be installed. Your project needs to be complete by the end of this year in order to qualify for that tax credit. If you do a lease with a solar leasing company, the tax credit will continue, and it just gets incorporated into the pricing of that lease. But there's been a lot of activity in the last month since that early termination was established. Some solar companies are reporting that they're already booked through the end of the year. So people need to act now if they want to get an installation this year.
Because just to hear that again, the system has to actually be installed and be operational by December 31st. It can't be that you just pay the bill, but then it gets installed next year. That's not going to fly.
That's right. You have to be installed, and then the local city or county will come out and do their inspection and say, yeah, an installation is complete. And at that point, you qualify. Yeah.
And how much roughly is a battery before the tax credit?
It's $15,000 to $20,000, and total cash price. It depends. If you got mega home, people put multiples of that up, but there are smaller batteries that are cheaper than it too if you're an energy miser. So there's a big range.
Right. Yeah. I don't have a battery right now, but I was shopping a little bit for it, and I was surprised that there is a bit of a price range now, depending on how much capacity you want and what you want to have on during a blackout, basically. If you don't want a lot on, then you can get a smaller battery. If you want the whole home powered for like 3 days or something like that, it can become more expensive.
Yeah, and if it's really just, the fridge and your electronics and a few other things, then you really don't need that much. You can get by quite a long time with a smaller battery. And it works just so it's so much better. A lot of people are getting gas generators that they sit in their driveway, and run an extension cord for one or two things in the house. And I sort of cringe when I hear that, because when you're not using that device often, it might not work, it might malfunction, it might be unsafe. And you install one of these batteries that's tied into your electric panel, it's way more reliable and safe.
And just for context here, Brad, like, what kinds of things would you say? Like one battery is about the size of like a college mini fridge, right? Like size wise, and you put it
That's
on your
right.
garage or
Yeah.
house. Like what kinds of stuff might that be able to power? Just for people who are trying to visualize this and what maybe one battery could do for their home.
For a small to medium-sized home without air conditioning or pool pumps, one of those battery units will take you through the night, right? Until the sun
Oh
comes up the
wow, okay.
next day, and then you can recharge it. If it's sunny, which often is, especially on these hot days that are the biggest problem, you'll fully recharge it the next day, and you can go on forever. If you've got a pool or you need air conditioning to be on, you're going to need a couple of those units.
We've been contacted a few times now by solar users who got solar like back in 2006 or thereabouts, which means that their net metering program is going to expire next year. And so they've been wondering, and in a lot of instances, their solar panels are still working well. This is one of the cool things about solar is like those panels can actually go beyond the 20-year warranty and operate well. So their question was at the point where they are kicked off of net metering because their 20-year grandfathering is up, and then the utility is now giving them bupkas for the extra energy that they give back to the grid. They were asking the question, would it be a cost, would it be a smart investment to get a battery at the point that the whole thing expires? What advice would you give these folks?
Well, I think that is absolutely the approach. If the panels are still operating well, which oftentimes after 20 years, you're talking about 80% output. 80% isn't bad if it's maintained at that level. And just adding a battery that allows you then to not put it on the grid, and you use all the energy you produce yourself. The big benefit is not buying energy from the utility in the evening when the rates are highest, and you can do that just by adding a battery. I love the idea of customers with still functioning panels going there without reinstalling a new solar system. If though the solar system is old and you need a roof replacement, you may be overdue for dealing with the roof, and it's a good time to get that done. Put up a fresh set of panels, and then you've got and a battery at the same time. You've got a whole new system, and it's worth the investment now going forward, the same way as it was 20 years ago when it was first installed.
One of the things we were telling people is you're asking yourself the right questions when you're thinking about it this way. And then obviously it's a hard call. Should you do it now and take advantage of the tax credit, remove the system, put a new one on, or just get a battery? I think what we tell people is if you're asking yourself these questions, then you're already 80% there. And then
That's
obviously
right.
the decision is, you have to decide what's the return on investment going to be.
Well, and you can get a couple of contractors to come out and do an A/B. Have them do the proposal two different ways, and then you just look at it and make a decision.
Yeah. So getting a couple of we always say get three bids.
Yeah.
In addition to that, what other advice would you give people who are shopping around for this kind of thing?
Well, it's don't overthink it. I talk to a lot of friends and neighbors who have solar quotes they want me to take a look at, and they're all very close. And you're trying to figure out which one's better, and they're basically all good options. So sometimes there is one that is clearly better. You go with that, and sometimes there's not, and you don't have to overthink it. These companies are out there to serve your interests.
Yeah, yeah. We do also tell people that you should generally err on the side of companies that are members of your organization, CALSSA, because we just feel like because you guys have a strong code of ethics, that the company is just more likely to be accountable to hold, being good to the consumer than somebody that's not a member. And then we also tell people they should probably look to see that they're certified by NABCEP. What do you think of that? And do you have other kind of like ways that consumers can kind of like, signaling devices that will tell the consumer that this is a reputable company?
Well, that's right. I mean, if you're a member of CALSSA as a solar installer, we work with our members when problems arise. Regulations change, and solar companies sometimes just have to get caught up, and they'll come to us, and we get them caught up on the latest rules. Or if there are customer complaints, we will go to the contractor and say, what's going on here, and work out those problems. So. You can look at the membership directory on the CALSSA website and find somebody near you. And NABCEP, I agree, is a really good that's above and beyond training. You need a certain amount of training to be a solar contractor, but then there's this voluntary extra training to be a top-notch installer, and it's called NABCEP. And those are the best companies that are out there. And then just look at reviews and reputation in the community, experience in the community. Obviously, a small contractor that's been around a long time if they haven't been taking care of customers all that time, they wouldn't still be there.
All right, good advice. Something that we get asked a lot, and I know the answer to this, but I think people will benefit from hearing it straight from the horse's mouth. So if you're on NEM 1 or NEM 2 and you add a battery, will that impact your NEM 1 or NEM 2 status?
No. It does not. If you're only adding a battery, then the original NEM status is preserved. If you installed 8 years ago, you'll have another 12 years on the same net metering tariff with the battery.
So the other question that we get asked a lot is, okay, if I add a battery, I'm safe, I can stay on my NEM 1 or my NEM 2, but if people want to add panels, that's tricky, because if they add more than 10% or 1 kilowatt, whichever is greater of their existing system, they'll get kicked off of NEM 1 or NEM 2 onto NEM 3 or NBT, again, same name for the same thing, which means they'll lose out on a lot of the value of the credit of that extra energy that they're sending back to the grid. So they'd want to be very careful of that. But it's our understanding that there's a bit of a workaround for that with these things called non-exporting systems. And I was hoping you could walk people through what this means, what their options might be, what kinds of questions they would want to ask or be looking for.
Yeah. And this is becoming quite common because a lot of us use more energy than we did when we first installed solar years ago. We have electric vehicle, we have electric appliances in the home. And it makes sense to be able to provide more solar to allow their customer to generate their own energy for that increased usage. And the Utilities Commission recognized that and agreed with our proposal to allow customers to add panels to an existing net metered system as long as those new panels did not export to the grid. And there's something that we're capable of doing. We control the energy output from those panels and the operation of the associated battery. And you can just tell the battery that if you stop using energy in the house, so suddenly there's energy going on to the grid, stop discharging the battery within 2 seconds. That's basically how it works. You measure the outflow. If you're flowing out towards the grid, stop discharging the battery. And then once you're using power again, you start discharging the battery. It's pretty simple logic. And so we've gotten pretty good at installing and designing those systems. So, customers are able to, it can cover their increased usage if they're using more power than they used to. And you can even do a little of that ahead of time. You can oversize some new system capacity in expectation of soon getting electric appliances or electric vehicles.
So like if someone thinks that they're going to get an EV or something like that, or they're going to add a heat pump in, then they can have their system be larger than what it is now. So in anticipation of adding something like that. Is that right?
That's right, because a lot of people are moving towards all electric homes. You hear about electrification. And you don't necessarily do it all at once because everything costs money, right? So you might do the car this year and the heat pump next year, but you want the solar to be all installed as one project. So you can put the solar in with the first wave of the work and then have it be big enough to cover the second wave of work.
And so if someone is interested in putting on this non-exporting system, adding to their existing system so that they don't get kicked off of NEM 1 or NEM 2, it was always my understanding that there were some very particular ways in which that had to happen, that the utilities were okay with that as long as the systems were designed a particular way with these things called single line diagrams, which I always think of as sort of like a blueprint. Is that right? So people have to be kind of careful to make sure their installer knows what they're doing.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. You submit a kind of an electrical schematic that gets submitted to the local government in your permit, and there's certain configurations that are allowed and some that are not. So just talk to your contractor, make sure they understand those rules and can clearly explain them to you. They might even have the CALSSA fact sheet that we encourage them to show to customers. They say this is what is allowed by the utilities, and if they've got that, you know that they're on the ball.
With a non-exporting solar system, does it always have to have a battery, or can you do it where it's just the panels?
You can do it with just the panels, but it makes more sense to store the power rather than not generate it, right? If you're doing it with solar only, that means you're just basically turning off the panels and off and on throughout the day. And you might as well put that energy in a battery and use it later.
I've heard that the utilities, however, will charge you some extra fee for putting in a non-exporting system.
That's right. They have this thing called departing load charge that's really criminal. They basically want to charge you for power that you no longer buy from them. It was something put in place more than 20 years ago for larger industrial systems, but it also carries over to these non-exporting systems that are not using the net metering tariff. And so it's, on a residential system, it might be a charge on the order of $35 a month, give or take, which is real money. It adds up over the year for sure. Money that you're giving to the utility that it's just a garbage fee that they are able to collect because of this legacy regulation. If you're installing a non-export solar addition, you're likely saving a lot more than $35 a month. So it's probably still going to be worth swallowing that. We hate having to swallow that pill, but it is currently part of the picture, and it will be for the foreseeable future.
We will add that to our list of things that we're going to get rid of. That's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. We are trying to figure out the process. This is one, like when there are challenges of this nature, that's my job to figure out how to change them. This one's a tricky one where there's no clear pathway and how to get approval to overturn it, but we are working on it.
Yeah. Well, we'll figure that out. I mean, for Pete's sake, we should not be required to pay the utility not to buy electricity from them. I mean, that is like essentially like the grocery store charging you when you decide not to go to them because you grow your own vegetables or you decide to go to a competing grocery store. It's like the most un-American, uncapitalist thing you could possibly think of.
Undemocratic, diabolical approach.
Utilities keep proposing new ways to do this. I mean, they act like they own your electricity usage, and if you generate your own, you give us even more money, or give us the same amount of money you used to. It's really arrogant, and the action of a monopoly Wall Street company that is used to getting its own way, because they used to they used to not be other alternatives, and now that they are. They're threatened, and they still have the process pretty wired.
Well, we've talked about, obviously, we have lots of solutions for the public that we're fighting and working with the public to get more of. The utilities are trying to block those solutions, and so the fight will continue. Are there other questions that you think we should be asking you, or other things that you want to say or tell our listeners?
I mean, all in all, we've had changes to net metering and creation of net billing and as an alternative to net metering, and we're seeing the end of the federal tax credit, and these things cut into savings from solar customers. But the sun is still going to be shining brightly in this state, and utility rates continue to grow, and we expect that trend not to stop. So it's absolutely a good time right now to invest in solar and stabilize your own energy costs. We expect that will still be the case. The level of savings will go up and down as these policies change. But when you're ready to install solar, it's going to be a good investment. So just prepare for that and talk to contractors. All
right. Yeah, I think that's a good reminder that the sun shines every single day. down on our rooftops and parking lots. And it's a good idea to put a bucket up there on your roof to capture some of that sunshine.
Yeah, it's
I just want to
great
catch it.
when you're using energy and the fuel is free. The
Yeah.
fuel is absolutely free. You're driving around, seeing other people standing at the gas station, pulling out their credit cards, and you have created your own power from sunshine. It's really beautiful.
I've had solar for now about 5 years, and I still, whenever I pull into my driveway and I see my panels, I'm like, so great.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's really a lovely bit of magic. The wonder of silicon that gets
Yeah.
excited by photons, and we get electricity. And we've just figured out how to capture that really effectively now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really
All
brilliant.
right. Well, Brad Heavner, thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you, and we hope to have you on again.
All right,
Thanks,
well,
Brad.
keep up the great work. Thank you.
Right back at you. Thank you. So now it's time for Solar Heroes, where we give a shout out to an awesome Solar Rights Alliance member. So Dave, who is our solar hero for this episode?
Our solar hero for this episode is Dency, who has been a solar advocate for years, long before the Solar Rights Alliance even started. And in a lot of ways, Dency was the Solar Rights Alliance before we were the Solar Rights Alliance.
Right.
But Dency is a very, very skilled connector. He's one of those people that seems to know everybody. He's very good at spreading the word and building relationships. And he's been really amazing to work with in all the different battles and fights that we've had.
Yeah, I vividly remember the first time that I met Dency, which was at my first protest with the Solar Rights Alliance. He was there, and it was just such a larger than life figure. Like, it was really highlighted for me how genuinely he has fought to defend rooftop solar for years and years and years. And you're so right that he really is such a connector. He's worked really hard to form real, genuine, lasting relationships with his elected officials. And there are some senators who text my cell phone now because Dency connected me to them. He's that genuine, that real, that involved, that connected. It really is remarkable.
Yeah, Dency could run a class on how to be, an advocate for a cause that you believe in, and how to do it with both persistence and also just grace, just doing it the right way. But in any event, it's been just an absolute joy to work with Dency. He is a treasure to this movement and this alliance to advocate for rooftop solar. And so thank you, Dency.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dency. You rock.
All right, let's check in with our action team. Cailey, what's new at the Solar Rights Action Center now that AB 942 has been defanged and the state Supreme Court has kicked the lawsuit back to the Court of Appeals?
We learned a lot in the fight to stop AB 942. And one of the things we learned, and maybe it's kind of one of these water is wet situations, but it still, I think, bears saying, is that the more people who reach out to their elected officials about an issue like this, the more likely it is that the elected official votes with us. So in other words, the more that a legislator hears from their constituents, the more likely they are to do what we are asking them to do. The reverse is also true. When there are not enough people who reach out to an elected official, that elected official does not tend to listen to what it is we are asking for. So we have an opportunity here to build the power of the alliance by bringing more people into it, by making sure there are more voices that are raised in the defense of rooftop solar. And you can be a part of that. So it's super simple. You just go to solarrights.org/sign up. It's on the screen right now. Again, that's solar, SOLAR, rights, RIGHTS.org/sign up. And sign up. It's very simple. It takes about 15 seconds, doesn't cost you anything. We never send or share your information to anybody ever. We have a super strict privacy policy. And what that does is it makes sure that people get the information about what is happening so they know if there's a threat coming down the pike for rooftop solar, if there's an opportunity to help rooftop solar grow. This is the way that we can continue to stop bad bills and also work to get good bills passed. This is the opportunity. And if you think about it, there are 150,000 people in the Solar Rights Alliance across the state of California. If every single one of you shared this sign-up link with just one person, we would double the alliance and our power overnight.
It may seem obvious to you. Yeah, no duh.
No duh.
More,
right?
more voices.
Is more power, Cailey. Yeah, we're with you on that. Yeah.
But we're really not kidding. We can actually see a cause and effect, the number of people that take action, and whether or not the legislator votes to defend rooftop solar or votes to defend utility profits. And every new person who gets added to the list and takes action when it's needed can be the difference between a legislator voting for or against your interest. And you can control that. We can all control that because all of us know at least one person who either has solar or cares about solar enough that they'd want to be on the list. And to get that one person to sign up and pay attention when we send out an alert, because we don't do that very often. And when we do, it's usually pretty important.
It's a big deal,
So,
right?
Right. So let's move, yes, water is wet, and you have some power here to increase the overall power of the alliance just by getting one more person. Please make that your goal this month, and feel free to go beyond one person, but at least please do one person. What a great show. Thanks for joining us today.
And thank you to everyone who took action to stop AB 942 and also to make sure that rooftop solar gets its day in court.
Thanks for tuning in for Solar Freedom, where we put the power back in your hands and help you defend the freedom and independence of rooftop solar. Goodbye for now.
Bye, folks.